prisoners of Reddit that served long sentences. What was the biggest culture shock to you once you were released? Worked with a guy that became obsessed with electronics and new vehicles. Like he was impressed with the stock radio in my work truck. When he got a car, a couple of the guys helped install a radio with OnStar in it. First day out I went to McDonald's and they changed the soda fountains to touch screen and let you add flavors and stuff. Blew my mind. With the Coke freestyle machines like that, you can also download the Coca-Cola app and create your own drinks. The machines are connected to the internet for automatic software updates and such. This also lets the app send it your custom mix. I've never cared to do it, but it's cool nonetheless. Damn, I've never been locked up and I didn't know this. Thanks. You should go commit a crime so you can try it once you get out. I've heard it said that carpeted floors are pleasantly shocking after years of walking on nothing but cement. I can relate to this. I worked as a tree planter for an entire summer, where you're walking around on bumpy forest terrain, dodging roots, mud, dips, etc. for 12 hours every day. Coming back to civilization and walking on a carpet felt like I was floating. I can only imagine how it would felt after years. How did you get that job? I interviewed a dude who went in for rape and murder in the early 80s and was released a few years ago because of DNA testing. It wasn't cell phones or the internet that threw him. He knew about that stuff pretty well. It was the cars. He was a mechanic before he was sentenced, and he said cars now are so different and have so much electronics. My father, who has been a mechanic since the 80s, says the same thing. He never went to prison, so I guess it really has changed a lot, if even someone who worked the entire time noticed. I work at a global fast food chain, and one guy and a woman entered. The guy was covered with tattoos. I was at the register taking orders and overheard the guy say, "What the hell is this?" referring to the kiosk. He and the woman ended up ordering from me and not the kiosk. The dude said to me, "You go away for a while and everything changes. It's crazy." He was a really nice dude, and it was kind of wholesome to see the woman teaching him about new technology. When I was 18, so back in 2001, my high school co-op placement thought it would be a good idea for me and another student to escort a freshly released inmate around. As we got to walking and talking, he told us how he went in for manslaughter, which he admitted he did, and was pinned for a murder inside, which he said he didn't do. I believed him. He admitted the first thing. That's when the other student and I were like, WTF. He saw a $2 coin. We are Canadians, and his mind was blown. He also had designs on a home-based tattoo business. He was looking for a craft store and thought Stitches clothing store was one. We had to explain stuff to him. Aside from him telling me to beware of sex traffickers and then kinda asking me out on a date, he was pretty nice. I told my mom. When I got home though, she hit the roof. The dishwasher at my old job served 26 years for murder. He was 21 when he went in. Came out to a completely different world. I remember him constantly asking me questions to look up on my smartphone, and I never got why. Finally I convinced him to get one and spent hours walking him through it. Then I realized he thought my phone's sole functionality was to look up info and was taken aback at how much other stuff smartphones can do. Nicest man in the world. Still keep up with him to this day. For those interested in the story, he'll share. Also might add that he is very open with sharing his story because he served his time and moved on. He grew up in a very poor area. His parents worked in the custodial arts at a well-known public university. His description of the town he lived in was a total culture shock to me. Very ghetto. Tons of crime. Some guy had been repeatedly raping his girlfriend at the time and told him if he raped her one more time, he'd kill him. After it happened again, he said he went to his house, buried a clip in his chest, went home and waited for the police to arrive. I remember him saying how he told his dad what he did when he got home and had already accepted the fact he's going to prison. He was 21. He's around 58 now and still works harder than anyone in the restaurant. He admits how stupid he was when he was a kid and wishes it never happened, but he's accepted his circumstances and moved on. A friend's brother went away for about 10 years. Hit and run while he was smoking a bit of weed in his car before school and ended up killing an old man who was walking. He was a nice kid and the man seemed like a nice guy, family guy too. Sad situation all around. He was pretty shocked by everything smartphone apps could do. He knew about this stuff because he was in a low security unit, but he really had a hard adjusting to actually using it. Seeing and hearing about this stuff secondhand is a huge difference to actually using it. His mind was blown by Tinder and Uber. He had a hard time grasping touchscreens, or couldn't really see why they were better than buttons. He's never even had a debit card and paid for everything in cash before he went in. He lost it when he saw people tapping their phones to pay for stuff. I think he really struggled applying to jobs online. My friend told me he struggled being in big open spaces for a bit. He didn't like to sit facing a wall with his back to all the people and stuff like that. Got really annoyed when people moved or touched his stuff. Also, told me that he was pretty lonely. She didn't go into too much detail, but all of his friends had moved on with life, gone to school, gotten jobs. Many were married with kids. They were still friendly to him when he got out, but they were all almost 30 and had moved on. He was basically just starting at 18 with a criminal record. That was 2-ish years ago though. He's finishing up a city college program and going to a state school starting next year. Actually feel pretty bad for him because his family was planning on making this whole big surprise thing for him for finishing city college and it all had to be put on hold because of COVID-19. I know there are bigger worries in the world now, but it's a bummer that he doesn't get to really celebrate his first big accomplishment since prison or really in his adult life at all. Not me personally, but a guy once gave a talk at my school after wrongfully being on death row for over 20 years. He was from the same town as me, and he went on and on about how, when he was growing up there it was almost farmland, and when he got out he was suddenly surrounded by fast food, industry, and development. I feel this. I lived in a rural area. While I drove past fields and forests on my way to my summer jobs and university, when I lived with my folks when I go through that area again. There are so many strip malls and houses crammed into subdivisions. It's kind of soul killing to see. There's a short road leading off a main drag near me in the Seattle suburbs that goes nowhere but up to a set of large wide gates, behind which is a large former horse farm. At the end, just by the gates, the county put a sign that says, "This road will be extended in the future." Just behind the gates, the home Miawana put a sign that says, "This road will not be extended in the future." Apostrophe. My stepdad got out after serving 25 years, got out in winter 2008, and was shocked the first time he saw a remote car starter. He was till one institution time so was up every day at 6 a.m. eating. When I woke up for breakfast before school, he went out to get the paper and saw my mom's car was running without her inside it and came running in and was shocked. "Your mother's car is running, but she's still upstairs getting ready for work," he said. I replied, "Yay, she does that to get it warm before she gets in the morning. So she keeps it running all night long?" he asked. Never occurred to me that I'd have to spend 10 minutes explaining remote starters to a 52-year-old that morning, let alone showing him how it works. Good guy, my stepdad was. Not me, but my uncle came back from prison after 20 years or something because of something that I'm not informed about. Probably robbery based on what I've heard. But regardless, here's a funny story. So essentially he came back from jail and he came back to our house just to see the family. And I thought I'd mess with him knowing that he wasn't accustomed to future capabilities. I just told my housebot to turn on the lights in the living room as we walked in. I looked back, and his face was like he just saw a ghost. Funniest shit I'd ever seen. You should have stopped and said in your best robot voice, "Skynet, activate lights." Apostrophe. Definitely would have tripped him out even more. I can't wait till he comes back to visit. Just don't tell him about any of the actual Terminator movies released since he went to jail. I only did a few years, but I remember trying to explain to someone what YouTube was. He came over and asked me. This was in 2013. and he was locked up in 1998. I explained how he can watch old live concerts people had recorded decades ago, or how he can go behind the scenes with different famous people, to the documentaries, and talked about the self-help videos for basically everything. The more I explained it to him, the more I realized just how crazy it is that it exists. Not me, but someone I met. I work at a store that sells personal electronics, i.e. laptops, tablets, headphones, etc. And our older gentleman came in, looked around 65 to 70, with someone who I assumed was their kid, and the old man was completely fascinated with everything in the store. So I go up and ask if they need any assistance with finding anything, and the old man wants to buy a computer. I tell him we have all kinds of computers and ask if he's looking for anything in particular. He told me no, and that I don't know a damn thing about electronics. And then he goes on to tell me that he's been in prison since 1965 and he just got out a couple months ago and he's trying to get back into the world. It was a wild thing to hear, and he told me about all the crazy stuff that happened while he was in prison. My uncle got out of a federal pen after 18 years. He stood in front of the canned meat section for 30 minutes. A friend of mine got on a Greyhound bus and sat next to a guy who asked to use his phone. My friend handed him his iPhone, to which he said, "What is this? How do I use it? I've been in jail for 13 years," to which my friend helped him and bought some beer at the next stop, and they talked about what's new. Greyhound buses are wild. I rode one through rural Western Canada a few years back when I was 17. Sat next to some older, rough-looking dude and prayed I wouldn't get beheaded. Turns out he was cool as fuck. Offered to smoke me up while at a rest stop. Ended up smoking up at each rest stop after that. Chatted about life. Turns out he used to be the guitarist for some big band back in the day, and now he makes a living traveling around rural Canada and performing music solo. You never know the cool ass people you'll meet on a Greyhound. Sad that they stopped operations in Canada now, though. Wonder what that guy's up to nowadays. It seems so many people have cool Greyhound stories, but I just had a creepy guy with Zelda tattoos try to get me to smoke pot with him. Not a prisoner, but my dad was previously incarcerated for 16 years. The first thing he told me was that he wasn't at all used to riding in a car. He was so used to walking around that being in a car made him uneasy. Vanilla root beer.